Welcome to the Old Mac Gang podcast, or if you prefer, OMG. I kind of like OMG. It's a podcast, a vodcast, with a panel of longtime Mac Apple users who want to discuss the most relevant apps and services for age-seasoned users. I'm Marty Gensius, an Apple enthusiast and also a podcaster. I'm a 67-year-old seasoned user who has collected a great group of people to be on this panel to talk about Apple and the kinds of concerns that we have with our own use. And we're going to share that with you. So let's see who we've got on the panel tonight.
My name's Peter. I'm a 72-year-old, twice retired gang member, and I was a foundryman and following that, a high school math teacher. I started my plunge into all things Apple in 2006, and I continue to love and use an ever larger assortment of Apple devices and services each and every day.
My name is Bob Wood. I'm in Tucson. I'm 70-something, and I am an Apple enthusiast and a Macintosh user group leader for a lot of years now.
My name is Gary.
Go ahead, Gary.
My name is Gary Shirk. I live in Cleveland, and I like what Bob was saying. When you think about the age season, I'm an 80-something-year-old, and the idea we're aged, so the number doesn't really mean a lot. What means more is that we're older, we're users, and we want to share what we know with older users. So there's a niche crowd out there that I believe we're appealing to, who want to use Macs become more enjoyable as they seasoned. All right, Chris.
Okay, I'm a 77-year-old Mac user. I've been around the Mac since 1984, worked for Apple for 8.5 years. I am, among other things, and I'm now retired and a member of Bob's user group, the Tucson Mac user group here in Tucson. And I'm very happy to join you all and talk about all things Mac and all things Apple.
Yeah, I got to say, Gary and Peter and I met through the Northeast Ohio Apple group. And, all of us have been members of that for quite some time. And they're both good friends of mine, Bob and Chris. Well, Bob, I met through MacStock. And Chris, I think we might have met at MacStock, or we've met before. Maybe it's because I've been to your user group before virtually. Vision Profiles.
Profiles, maybe.
Yeah. So this episode, we're going to cover protection and scams. I mean, we're pretty heavy into the holidays already, but with the experiences that some of us have had and with concerns that we've had, the past episodes have all been about troubleshooting and issues with how to solve troubleshooting problems. And we jumped on this idea about talking about scams and security protection. Peter found a really good article that summarizes it, and I'll share some of that on the screen, and we'll also put it in the show notes of the show so folks can see that. And Peter, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about the article that you found, and I will switch back and forth to the screen as you talk about it.
Well, it's from the CISA, C-I-S-A, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure, Security Agency? Something like that. I don't remember what it decodes to exactly, but it is our national authority to try to keep our whole our whole internet secure and safe. And they deal with a lot of things, but they are very concerned with holiday shopping, and they're concerned with people not getting fooled by people engaging in phishing schemes or hijacking of their equipment. And they have several points. Keeping your software updated. The people who are looking at the screen can see this: using strong passwords, using a password manager, turning on multi-factor authentication. They go into looking out for phishing attempts, so being alert to messages, not clicking links unless you're pretty sure what they are and where they're going, and being wary of requests for information. If somebody asks for a lot of detailed information about you, that's probably trouble, and reporting when these things happened to the people someone's pretending to be and to the relevant legal authorities. When you're purchasing stuff, you should use an encrypted connection. You should choose reputable vendors. Marty probably remembers me being a little timid for a discount on Perplexity a week or two ago.
Mhm.
And I asked him a couple of times, did you try it? Did it work? Before I was willing to sort
Yeah.
of try it. So I like someone else being the guinea pig. I'm not proud of that. Using credit cards, not debit cards, and checking your accounts frequently. Those are all the tips they had on that website.
Peter,
Yeah,
I saw another one, Marty,
Go ahead.
which caught my eye. I was about unsubscribing. Excuse me. Sometimes maybe it's best if you don't get annoyed very much, is just put the unsubscribe, which you may have been intending to do, in your junk folder. Then I've heard eventually Apple will know that belongs in the junk folder and put it there. Because if you do the unsubscribe, then they've got something on you. Any thoughts?
Yeah, there are legitimate organizations where you can really unsubscribe, and those are pretty obvious. But the problem
Mhm.
early on that the so-called experts said about this was that when you unsubscribe, it can alert people that it's a good phone number, it's a good email address, or whatever. Again, that information is about 5+ years old, so it may have changed. But I think the really good news here is what Peter's found. It's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. And it's nice that the government has this, and they've got somewhere you can go to report cyber issues. So it's something certainly worth looking at, particularly for those of us that help others, because we might be the first line of defense. Somebody calls up and says, "Oh, I think I've been scammed." That kind of thing.
Yeah, and in this article link will be posted in the show notes. So listeners, whether they're listening to us on a podcast or watching on it through YouTube, will have access to this article. And each of the categories that Peter talked about has links to it that gives you more information about those ideas, like updating your software and using strong passwords and how to go about doing that. So, we're kind of talking about it here, but there's a lot more for you to look at if you're a listener or a viewer on it. I'm going to start out and just share a little bit. And hopefully maybe each of you have some story or something to add from your own experience. I have not been hit by a scammer. That doesn't mean there haven't been attempts. For me, it is a interesting opportunity each time I get one, and I've gotten better at knowing which ones they are and how they're coming. So some typical ones that I see: text messages. I'm getting a lot of text messages now from people who say, "Hi, haven't heard from you in a long time." They don't tell me who they are. They don't give me any identifying information. And I think the intent is for me to respond to that and then start to pull information from me. Typically, what you get if you respond to it is, "Oh, I'm sorry, I must have gotten the wrong number. I'm sorry, my assistant put the wrong number in my contact list." I generally don't mess around with them. A couple of times I have. I told them that they should fire their assistant for incompetence. And then they get, "Well, why should I fire them? You don't sound like a very nice person." And I realize I'm dealing with a scammer at that point. So text messaging is one way that I get hit for scammers. There's a lot of delivery services that I use, and that's a very common process for people to do that. So I get emails from UPS, UPSS, or United, the postal service. I get it from FedEx. I get these, and they're text messages sometimes looking fake, or they're emails that come in, and being very careful about not clicking on things within that email. and, looking at the email return address to see if it really is from that institution or from that business. And that doesn't necessarily guarantee that the information, even if the email looks legitimate, that it's necessarily a legitimate organization or association. I'll kind of stop there and turn it back to the group and see if there are other examples that y'all can think of that you've been hit with.
I got really close on one, and it wasn't until the person asked me to go get a bunch of gift cards that it tipped me off right away. And it sounded very realistic. And there had been, gosh, there was a story on NPR's The World podcast. I think it's put out by Public Radio International. And there was a story last week about a scam village that they broke up overseas. And it was huge. 36 buildings, healthcare, hundreds of people. People were kidnapped and forced to do this scamming work with targets of like $100,000 a month. I mean, this is very real, and people need to take this stuff seriously. And doubling back to what you just said, Marty, here it is, the holiday season, right? So, you could get an email that says that your son or daughter, with their name filled in, sent you a package, but we have incomplete information. You need to fill this in, like what is your zip code, or call us or sign in or something. And, again, red flag, probably better to contact the individual, even though it ruins the surprise, and say, did you really do this? Is this really you? Because they can use logos. There's been stuff that's come out from Apple, and there's a report phishing thing that you can send stuff to, but you have to take your email, make it an enclosure, and then you can forward it to Apple with the address for report phishing. And they do investigate them. But it's tough. It's going to be tough this season too. So people need to just pay extra attention. Maybe others want to amplify on that.
Any other examples or attempts that you've had?
Yeah, I had several close calls, a lot of them a long time ago. I mean, before there were web browsers and I was on internet news groups, I sold a calculator to a guy in Germany, and he was active on the group. So I figured he would want to keep his reputation in the group and would come through and pay me. But he hemmed and hawed. Then when I had one of my cousins in Germany call him on the phone from within Germany, suddenly my payment appeared. So that worked out nicely. When eBay was fairly new and first made their alliance with PayPal, I purchased an auction from somebody in Canada, and within moments of winning the prize, I got emails from 10 or 12 people who warned me that this guy was trouble. My credit card had already been charged, but I went through my credit card company and had it reversed. Got some grief from PayPal saying, we might eliminate your PayPal account. This isn't according to the terms of eBay and us. And I said, well, then cancel my account, but I did keep my money. I had someone pretend to be me and file an unemployment claim. Fortunately, my employer was hot on the case and denied it. So I didn't get into much bureaucracy, but I did go to the Secretary of State and didn't feel like the Secretary of State of Ohio, which was the place you're supposed to report to, followed up on it very well. This was right at the beginning of COVID, and there were lots of these claims. But their system for intake was terrible, absolutely terrible. And I guess the last one is just being, probably goes to the principle of if something's too good, it's trouble. I got talked into installing an alarm system by some guy on my porch. And halfway through watching it get installed, I thought, this is trouble. Now, I'm a lawyer and I know there's a cooling off period. So as soon as their truck left, I called the company and said, take it out. And they did take it out, and I was not charged. But I felt very foolish because I misunderstood one of the terms. I thought I was getting a heck of a deal, and I was not. And when a little mathematics was applied, I realized what was going on. And, so I was lucky. But these scams have precede the internet. And when there's something that succeeds the internet, I'm sure there will still be scams. I think the principles of being careful good computer hygiene should always be kept in mind.
Yeah,
Just yesterday,
Bob?
just
Go ahead, Chris.
yesterday, I watched a YouTube presentation, and it was centering around this wrong number text scam. And I certainly recommend that everybody watch this short YouTube presentation. And because this guy, who happens to be a member of our Mac user group here in town, followed through with it and had all these conversations. He knew he was being scammed and he wasn't going to give away any personal information. And so he went through and he documents all this stuff that they were trying to do, and how, oh, you sound like such a nice person, and I'm really sorry I got the wrong number. And gee, I'm in California. I'd be happy to buy you a coffee. Where are you located?
Yeah.
And it went on and on from there. I'm going to put the link into the private chat, and perhaps
We'll put
Marty
it in the show notes, Bob.
can put it in the show notes. And so I would suggest that everybody go listen to this broadcast and maybe even sign up for Roger's regular Tuesday GoFor Lunch broadcast, because he always has something short, anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. And then he takes a few questions.
Yeah, I got one just today, and it was in my junk mail. So it was effectively screened. But this is another common kind of phishing attempt. It's sort of an extortion attempt. Hi, you don't know me, but we've been watching what you've been doing on the internet. And some of it would shock people if they found out what you've been doing. Now, I'm angelic, so it was not, I never do anything that's bad or nasty or go into dark spaces on the internet. But that was the threat. And it was, I got about halfway through this extremely long email. It's like, if you're going to threaten somebody, don't make it too long, because it was in my junk anyways. But it generally turns about asking for Apple gift cards, or paying things in Bitcoin, which, then is not traceable. And so it's that kind of extortion attempt. And they're like, don't throw this email away, because, if you don't respond to this, this is all going to be all over the internet. Well, I've probably received 10 of these emails over the last 5 years, and I don't respond to it. And my stuff is never wound up all over the internet. So besides being angelic, I don't have anything to worry about. But that is a common sort of extortion approach that happens with scamming that I've seen. The text messaging thing that you talk about, Bob, and that Roger plays out. Yeah, and some of my more entertaining moments, I've, communicated back with the person, being careful not to give any identifying information or just make stuff up. Now, I don't think that's the best tact of action, and now I'm just deleting them when they come across, because they've lost entertainment value for my part. But yeah, it's and you can go on YouTube or TikTok and find videos of people who were stringing along scammers for a long period of time, just to take up their time and waste their time. And some of them have actually turned over valuable information to authorities, but that's beyond, I think, most listeners' capabilities to do. But yeah, it's sort of, I'd like to buy you coffee. I'm in California. Where are you at? What do you do for a living? Oh, that's very interesting. Tell me a little bit more about where you work. Are you married? Do you have kids? All sorts of, can we stop texting this way, and can we get on Telegram, or get on Google Chat, some other source where they would be able to get more information from you? So any other examples that folks like to talk about?
I really don't have time for this in a way. I'm only really, I kind of remembered when I was auditing, we used to have to send out a second request on an accounts receivable confirmation. And sometimes that crosses my mind that I'll just wait for a second request from somebody. But normally I can tell in the text messages that they're not worth, they're only worth deleting. So, and the emails, I think the most important thing for me is to go to the sender where you can do that little drop down to find out where that email is coming from. If it's not obvious that it's a scam email, and then just delete it. So I haven't really received a lot, but that's my practice.
Any
When
other?
I first, when we first retired and moved down here back in 2018, at the time my cell phone was 650 area code for the San Francisco Peninsula where I work. And I was getting a lot of spam calls in Mandarin, mostly about car warranties, people tell me, and other calls. And so Apple was on the verge of coming out with this visual voicemail where they'll transcribe the voicemail and it'll start appearing on your screen if somebody actually leaves the voicemail. And many times that's fast enough for me to pick up if it happens to be a doctor's office or something that I don't have listed. But as an experiment, which I've continued, I stopped picking up unknown numbers completely. And I don't even put it in my voicemail. Initially I did, and then I took it out. And it's just amazing how many calls. They finally slowed down a lot, but I was getting about 10 to 15 a day with just spam stuff.
Yeah, same thing with me and text messages. It seems to go through waves with me. And the first thing I'll check with a text message is what's the originating number. And if it's an international country, I mean, I do work with international teachers, but I know they would identify themselves, or I would have them in my account to know that it's them. But if it's an international number, saying, "Hey, I haven't talked to you in a long time," or "When was the last time we got together? Where are you at?" Asking questions like that, I know this is just a scam. So, yeah.
Well, I think these things come in waves, and I just finished a wave. My landline is identifiable to my home and my homestead tax exemption. So 3 days ago, I stopped getting my dozen phone calls a day for Medicare Advantage plans, which you might expect.
Yeah.
I think that there are what I call junk emails. I think there's like 3 different levels. I think there's some emails that I think are junk because they don't apply to me, that are actually people trying to find employment or something. A lot of it seems to be coming from people on the Indian subcontinent. And maybe those people are genuinely trying to find a job. And then there's the people who are certainly really, really trying to scam you. And there might be people in between that are half scammers, and you're not going to want to deal with them. But if you reply to the email, even to unsubscribe, maybe they will unsubscribe you from their list, but then they're going to turn around and sell your name and your email address as, here is a valid email address. Give me some money and you can have my list of valid email addresses.
Mm-hmm.
So it's best, as Marty said, just put it in a junk folder and don't do anything with it. Don't reply.
I got one today from someone who wanted to provide editing services for podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and he referred to this podcast actually, and he said, we can help improve the podcast and get rid of the ums and the ahs. And I don't go that much into that myself with editing, but I wrote him back and I said, listen, I've been doing podcasts and editing for a while. I have the tools to do it. I know how to do it. I don't always choose to do it, but I'm not going to be in need of your services. And the guy followed up with an email and said, thanks for explaining it to me. It was, and it was his business. And I think it was called the Podcast Doctors or something like that. So yeah, Bob, sometimes now he could be just phishing, but he didn't get a lot from me in that attempt. That wasn't already public, but Bob, yeah, sometimes it's people looking for business, and looking to being aware of what's going on, in the medium, because it's their medium that they work in and that they get business from. So I'm looking at our time, and I just want to share a few more pages that I'll also put up in the group, in the show notes and for the group. So this is comes from another government site, Office of Comptroller of the Currency. But it's an article that's just specifically about phishing attacks, and it's broken down. You can see it here, how phishing works, how to protect yourself, what happens if you fall victim to phishing, tips to fight identity theft, and then some larger versions of the page if you want, to kind of help assist people with that. But it's got some really good tips on it. So this would be another site I would encourage listeners and or viewers to go to, and we'll put it in the show notes. And then another one from the Federal Trade Commission that talks about what do you do if you were scammed, with what happens if you already paid a scammer, and giving people personal information, if it's a credit card or debit card and how those are dealt differently with banks and what you can deal with. What do you do if you give somebody your personal information and then give suggestions for links that you can go to, and then how to report scams to the FTC. So those are a couple of extra pages without getting into reading all of them. Those are a couple extra pages that you might want to look at to get a good idea of how to address this and prepare yourself for it or to prevent it if it should happen. So we've got a lot to include, and we will do so in the show notes. Any other comments or things to sum up, guys?
Yeah, I think one important last word is just to say to everyone, don't do something on the internet that you know is sketchy. Or maybe I should just say, don't do something wrong. I read a lot of books by Carl Hyacin and Elmore Leonard about hucksters and grifters. And the ones who get the hook into their victims are the ones who have a victim who's also complicit in doing something wrong. And I just think of the students I've had who come say, help me get all the viruses off my computer, that I can't believe what's here. Well, what were you doing? Well, I was trying to download the Wicked, the new Wicked movie. It was available for only $3, at this one website. And, then my computer exploded. Well, that's to be expected.
Yeah, I had that with a lot of international teachers when they came over, because in many countries their internet is restricted. And they came over and then they could browse to dangerous places, and they'd come in the next day with their computer and they're like, my computer's got all this junk on it. I don't know how it happened. Well, you've got a bunch of stuff, viruses and stuff put on and phishing ways, putting keystroke stuff thrown on your computer because some of the places you went and the fact that you didn't have any type of protection to prevent that from happening for you. So yeah, it's a interesting world out there in terms of what scammers can do. I've heard a couple of things. Never give anybody your phone number. Never give anybody your over the internet. Don't give your phone number. Don't give your date of birth. Don't give any personal identifying information through the internet. People and businesses, banks will not call you for that. They will not send you text messages for that. And people get sucked into that, and then they run into real financial issues when the banks when the scammer gets their hook into their bank account. So just some sensible things. Another idea that I heard, and this came from Mac Power Users, and that podcast, December 8th podcast, where they said, if you are one of those folks who are a little more tech savvy, and I put our group in this place, offer yourself as a support for your friends and your relatives and say, hey, if there's anything that happens that's questionable, before you do anything, give me a call. Because we know this territory a little bit more because we're focused on this and we keep up with this kind of information. Your friend, your relative might not. And so offer that service to those loved ones and friends that you have around you, that they can call you if there's
Yeah.
anything that's questionable.
That gets me into my favorite Perplexity again, where you could go on Perplexity and just ask these questions about something and see what happens. But it's
Oh,
and
yeah.
also where Peter went to Marty on the sale, which I looked at too, that kind of looked worth asking somebody about.
Right. Well, I don't want Marty to be my guinea pig, but I would say when I get an email and it looks pretty good, I think using Perplexity or Google or whatever to just take the subject line and see what comes up. And you might
Yeah.
get an alert that this is out there trying to scam people. I mean, that's a
Mhm.
There was one today that came up in a group that I'm in that's uses Slack, and somebody said, "Hey, I want to tell you about this scam that's come up. It's you get something sent to you. What was this called? A brushing, where you get something sent to you in the mail, like it came from Amazon or it came from someone, and in it is a you open it up and you're like, I don't know, this must have been sent to the wrong person or whatever, but in it is a piece of paper with a QR code on it. And it says, if there's a problem or if there's an issue, scan the QR code and it'll take you to the site. Well, the scam there is it takes you to a site and it winds up opening up possibilities. Now, the person who posted this, I think had probably gotten it off of Facebook, and some of the reports on it were that it would do everything. It'll take your firstborn male child. It'll just do all these horrendous things as soon as you take a picture and hit that link. And so I went to look it up because I knew we were going to do this show tonight. And it turns out that Snopes, which is a good site to look at for scams or for just information that you hear that you think, oh, this is crazy, it can't be true. Well, Snopes will look at those rumors and will investigate them. So I put that in to Snopes, and Snopes says, yeah, this is true, but the possibilities of what the rumors are of what it can do are way beyond that. So I couldn't help myself. I took the URL to the Snopes article and ran it through a QR code generator and posted back to the group the QR code. So it was, kind of a little fun with the issue. If you want to find out the true story, scan this QR code to tell you about not scanning QR codes. But the brushing, it seems to be something that's happening a lot too. People are getting things in the mail that aren't theirs, and then there are tricks that scammers will use to get information from you or to have it sent back, which makes you, which gives your identity a challenge when you do that. So, any final
Marty,
news? Yeah.
maybe a little topic on the QR code sometimes might be worth part of a show.
Yeah, we can talk about those and how they're used and how they can be effective. Bob, Chris, anything else on scammers for tonight?
I'd say one one final thing. I'm very impressed with these documents that Peter found, and I hope people will download them, save them, share them. If there's somebody that does generally tech support for you, share them with them so that they can reshare, because they're good, they're clear, they're very simple, they're very easy to read, and if you follow these, that should take care of a lot of it. And kudos that they did this. It's been years and we've never had something like, so it's nice to see this stuff coming out. It's nice to know the government's involved and trying to help on it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it for tonight's episode. We live stream Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Now we're running into some holidays. Next Wednesday is Christmas. The Wednesday after that is New Year's. So off show, we'll talk maybe about a time we can get together, and maybe the show will be more of an end of the year wrap up show. And we'll get one in between the 2 weeks or 3 weeks that will be off because of the holiday and when we have time to record. So, but generally live stream on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern time on YouTube at youtube.com/@old gang. and or you can pick up the podcast and video cast later on if you want to just go to our site. Join us on Wednesdays if you can. If you're not, pick us up on the podcast and look for us there. Please share with your friends about this Old Mac Gang podcast and vodcast. Our music bed is by Philip Gross, Marrakesh, courtesy of the Free Music Archive. More information about this podcast and others can be found at thepodtalk.net. Thanks to the group, Gary, Chris, Peter, and Bob, and thank you for being part of the Old Mac Gang. We'll see you next time.